My theme in these lectures generally is a new citizenship. In this lecture, my subject is morality and politics. I'm not referring here to the morality of politicians. I'm referring instead to the role that moral and religious argument should play in political discourse and in justifying laws. Many people shudder at the prospect. Isn't it dangerous, they ask, to bring morality and religion into politics? Isn't it safer for government to try to be neutral and avoid taking sides on the moral and religious convictions its citizens espouse? I say no, not necessarily, for two reasons. First, it's often not possible for government to be neutral on substantive moral questions. And second, the attempt to do so can make for an impoverished public discourse. Let me begin where I left off last time, with a case about buying and selling. Some couples are unable to bear children of their own, but they don't want to adopt. They want a genetically related child. So they provide the egg and sperm and hire a woman to carry the pregnancy for them, a surrogate mother. When the surrogate gives birth, she turns the child over to the commissioning couple. Commercial surrogacy is illegal in the UK and in most European countries. In the United States, some states permit the practice and others prohibit it. Even where it's legal, it's quite expensive. Confronted with high costs and legal restrictions, people have turned to a familiar solution. Paid pregnancy is now outsourced to low-cost providers. In 2002, India legalized commercial surrogacy in hopes of attracting foreign customers. And in Mumbai, an obstetrician recently told the London Evening Standard that she delivers, on average, one baby from a surrogate for a British couple every 48 hours. From the standpoint of market efficiency, outsourcing pregnancy to women in the developing world makes perfect sense. The money the women earn, around $7,500, is often more than they would make in 15 years. For the prospective parents, hiring an Indian woman to bear their child is a great bargain. The total cost is about a third of what it would be in Britain or in the United States. Everyone gains. And yet there is something unsettling about this new global industry. One source of unease may be a doubt about consent. Have the women freely chosen to bear other people's babies for pay? Or are they driven to it, in effect, by force of poverty and economic necessity? But even if we're satisfied that the arrangement is not coercive, there remains a further moral question, not about consent, but about degradation. Does treating babies and pregnancies as commodities degrade them? Does it fail to value them in the right way? Elizabeth Anderson, a moral philosopher, has applied a version of this idea to the surrogacy debate. She argues that surrogacy contracts degrade women and children by treating them as if they were commodities. And by degradation, she means treating something in accordance with a lower mode of valuation than is proper to it. Commercial surrogacy degrades children, she argues, because it uses them as instruments of profit rather than cherishes them as persons worthy of love and care. It also degrades women, Anderson argues, by treating their bodies as factories and by paying them not to bond with the children they bear. The surrogate's labor is alienated, Anderson writes, because she must divert it from the end which the social practices of pregnancy properly promote, namely an emotional bond with the child. So this idea that there are certain proper ends or purposes to social practices, this idea suggests that to determine the right way of valuing things, we have to figure out the purpose, the end of the social practice in question. And this idea is an idea that goes all the way back to Aristotle. Let me give you a very brief summary of Aristotle's theory of justice. Justice means giving people what they deserve. That's it. That's my summary of Aristotle's theory of justice. Now, of course, who deserves what depends on the kind of thing being distributed. So Aristotle says, suppose we're distributing flutes. Who should get the best ones? His answer, the best flute players. Why? Well, the most obvious reason, you might be thinking, is that this will result in the best music, making everybody better off. But this isn't Aristotle's reason. He thinks the best flutes should go to the best flute players because that's what flutes are for, to be played well. The purpose of flutes and of musical performance generally is to produce excellent music. It's also to honor and recognize those who are great musicians. That's why the best musicians should get the best flutes. But this case seems too easy. Most people would agree that flutes are for the sake of producing music. What happens if people disagree about the purpose of the activity in question? Is it possible to reason about the purpose of social practices in the face of disagreement? Aristotle believes that it is, and I think he's right. Now let's shift from flutes to golf. Here is an Aristotelian story about a controversy over golf. Casey Martin was a professional golfer with a bad leg. He had a circulatory disorder, and so walking the golf course for 18 holes caused him considerable pain and posed a serious risk of fracture. Despite his disability, Casey Martin was an excellent golfer. He asked the PGA, the Professional Golfers Association, for permission to use a golf cart during tournaments. They said no. Martin took his case to court. He argued that the law about disability accommodation, the Americans with Disabilities Act, required reasonable accommodations for people with disabilities, provided, as the law said, that the change did not fundamentally alter the nature of the activity. That was the law. Some of the biggest names in golf testified in the case. Arnold Palmer, Jack Nicklaus, Ken Venturi, all defended the ban on carts. They argued that fatigue is an important factor in tournament golf and that riding rather than walking would be an unfair advantage. Believe it or not, the case went all the way to the United States Supreme Court. What's interesting about the case is that as the justices wrestled with it, they found themselves facing an Aristotelian question. The court had to determine the essential nature of the activity in question. Is walking the course essential to golf or merely incidental? To resolve the question about Casey Martin's rights, the court had to determine the purpose or the essential nature of the game. What do you suppose they decided? Well, the court ruled 7-2 that Casey Martin had a right to use a golf cart. The court concluded that accommodating his disability by letting him ride in a cart would not fundamentally alter the game, which was, the justices concluded, mainly about making shots, trying to get the ball into a very small hole. What, after all, was the conflict over the golf cart really about? On the surface, it was about fairness. But if fairness were the only thing at stake, there would have been an easy and obvious solution. Let all golfers use carts in the tournaments. But this solution was anathema to professional golf, even more unthinkable than making an exception for Casey Martin. Why? Because the dispute was less about fairness than about honor and recognition. Specifically, the desires of the PGA and top golfers that their sport be recognized and respected as an athletic event. Let me put the point as delicately as possible. Golfers are somewhat sensitive about the status of their game. It involves no running or jumping, and the ball stands still. No one doubts that golf is a demanding game of skill, but the honor and recognition accorded great golfers depends on their sport being seen as a physically demanding athletic competition. If the game at which they excel can be played while riding in a cart, their recognition as athletes could be questioned or diminished. So, who's ever right about the essential nature of golf, the federal case over Casey Martin's cart offers a powerful illustration of Aristotle's point. Debates about rights are often, unavoidably, debates about the purpose of social institutions, the goods they allocate, and the virtues they honor and reward. Let's turn now to a hotly contested contemporary issue, the question of same-sex marriage. It's a prominent issue in the United States. Several American states now permit gay marriage. Many others allow for civil unions or civil partnerships. These are arrangements that stop short of marriage, but grant legal protections, inheritance rights, hospital visitation rights, child custody arrangements, and so on, to unmarried partners of the same sex who live together. So here's the question. Should the state recognize gay marriage on the same basis as marriage between a man and a woman? Some people say yes, and argue for same-sex marriage on what they claim are neutral, non-judgmental grounds. Whether one personally approves or disapproves of gay and lesbian relationships, individuals should be free to choose their marital partners. Now, if this argument is a sufficient basis for according state recognition to same-sex marriage, then it's true. The issue can be resolved without entering into controversies about the purpose of marriage and the moral status of homosexual relationships. But the case for same-sex marriage can't be made on neutral or non-judgmental grounds. Here's why. The debate over same-sex marriage is fundamentally a debate about whether gay and lesbian unions are worthy of the honor and recognition that in our society state-sanctioned marriage confers. So the underlying moral question is unavoidable. To see why this is so, it's important to bear in mind that the state can take 3 possible positions toward marriage, not just 2. First, it can recognize marriage only between a man and a woman, though perhaps offering gay men and lesbians civil partnerships, as the UK currently does. That's policy 1. Or, policy 2, it can recognize same-sex marriage on an equal basis with heterosexual marriage, as my home state of Massachusetts has done. Or 3, it could decline to recognize marriage of any kind and leave this role to private associations and religious communities. Now, the third policy is purely hypothetical. As far as I know, no state or country has renounced marriage as a government function. But policy 3 is the ideal libertarian solution to the marriage debate. It doesn't abolish marriage, but it does abolish marriage as a state-sanctioned institution. Michael Kinsley, an opinion journalist with libertarian sympathies, defends this policy, this third option, as a way out of what he sees as a hopeless argument over marriage. The solution, Kinsley writes, is to end the institution of government-sanctioned marriage, or to privatize marriage. Here's how he puts it, quote, let churches and other religious institutions continue to offer marriage ceremonies. Let department stores and casinos get into the act if they want. And yes, if 3 people want to get married, or 1 person wants to marry herself, and someone else wants to conduct a ceremony and declare them married, let them. That's Kinsley. So he proposes, in effect, to replace all state-sanctioned marriages, gay and straight, with civil partnerships. Now, relatively few people on either side of the same-sex marriage debate have embraced the disestablishment proposal. But this third option helps us see why proponents and opponents of same-sex marriage must contend with the substantive moral and religious controversy about the purpose of marriage and the virtues it honors. Many who defend a right to same-sex marriage try to rest their claim on neutral grounds to avoid passing judgment on the moral meaning of marriage. And this attempt draws heavily on the ideas of non-discrimination and freedom of choice. But these ideas can't by themselves justify the right. If freedom of choice were all that mattered, the state would have no grounds for limiting marriage to 2 persons. Consensual polygamous partnerships would also qualify. And if the state really wanted to be neutral and respect whatever choices individuals wish to make, it would have to adopt Kinsley's proposal and get out of the business of conferring recognition on any marriages. This would be the equivalent in the case of marriage of letting everyone ride in a golf cart if they chose. The real issue in the gay marriage debate is not freedom of choice, but whether same-sex unions are worthy of honor and recognition by the community, whether they fulfill the purpose of the social institution of marriage properly understood. The Massachusetts court that became the first court in the United States to require recognition of same-sex marriage understood this point. Though the court gave a nod to neutrality and freedom of choice, it made clear that it did not intend to open the way to polygamous marriage, nor to call for the abolition or disestablishment of marriage. Chief Justice Margaret Marshall wrote the opinion for the court, and in making the case, she stepped outside the bounds of liberal neutrality to affirm the moral worth of same-sex unions and to offer a view about the purpose of marriage properly understood. More than a private arrangement between 2 consenting adults, she wrote, marriage is a form of public recognition and approval. In a real sense, there are 3 partners to every civil marriage, 2 willing spouses, and an approving state. If marriage is an honorific institution, what virtues does it honor? To ask this question is to ask about the purpose of marriage. And this is really the heart of the dispute. Opponents of same-sex marriage claim that the primary purpose of marriage is procreation. Since same-sex couples are unable to procreate on their own, the opponents argue they don't have a right to marry. They lack, so to speak, the relevant virtue. This line of reasoning is at the heart of the case against same-sex marriage, and Justice Marshall took it on directly. She disputes the claim that procreation is the primary purpose of marriage, and she does so by showing that marriage as currently practiced and regulated by the state does not require the ability to procreate. Heterosexual couples who apply for marriage licenses are not asked about their ability or intention to conceive children. Fertility is not a condition of marriage. People who have never consummated their marriage and never plan to may be married. People who can't stir from their deathbed may marry. So wrote Justice Marshall for the court. And so she concludes it's the exclusive and permanent commitment of the married partners to one another, not the begetting of children, that is the sine qua non of civil marriage. So how does the argument work? Part of the argument consists of an interpretation of the purpose or essence of marriage as it currently exists. Another part of the argument is to ask which interpretation of marriage celebrates virtues worth honoring. What counts as the purpose of marriage partly depends on what qualities we think marriage should celebrate and affirm. This makes the underlying moral and religious controversy unavoidable. What is the moral status of gay and lesbian relationships? Marshall is not neutral on this question. She argues in the court opinion that same-sex relationships are as worthy of respect as heterosexual ones. So the case for same-sex marriage is not neutral after all. In order to decide who should qualify for marriage, we have to think through the purpose of marriage and the virtues it honors. And this carries us onto contested moral terrain, where we can't remain neutral toward competing conceptions of the good life. What does all of this tell us? The attempt to detach arguments about justice and rights from arguments about the good life is mistaken for two reasons. First, it's not always possible to decide questions of justice and rights without resolving substantive moral questions. And this is true whether we're arguing about surrogacy, or about how to distribute flutes, or political authority, or the right to use a golf cart, or same-sex marriage. Arguments about justice and rights are unavoidably arguments about the moral meaning of the goods at stake. The second reason is that even where it may be possible, it may not be desirable. And that brings me back to the question of revitalizing our public discourse in democratic life. But if, as I've argued, it's not possible for government to be neutral on these disagreements, is it nonetheless possible to conduct our politics on the basis of mutual respect? The answer, I think, is yes. In recent decades, we've come to assume that respecting our fellow citizens' moral and religious convictions means ignoring them, leaving them undisturbed, conducting our public life insofar as possible without reference to them. But this stance of avoidance makes for a spurious respect. Often, it means suppressing moral disagreement rather than actually avoiding it. This, in turn, provokes backlash and resentment, as we see in the rise of religious fundamentalism. A more robust public engagement with our moral disagreements could provide a stronger, not a weaker, basis for mutual respect. What would that look like? Well, rather than avoid the moral and religious convictions of our fellow citizens, we should attend to them more directly, sometimes by challenging and contesting them, sometimes by listening and learning from them. It is always possible that learning more about a moral or religious doctrine will lead us to like it less. But we cannot know until we try. A politics of moral engagement is not only a more inspiring ideal than a politics of avoidance. If it's true, as I've tried to argue, that our debates about justice are often inescapably arguments about the good life, then a politics of moral engagement is also a more promising basis for a just society. Thank you very much.